Daniel Carter, a hard-working mechanic and single father, is driving home late at night when he's pulled over by Detective Ray Lasker, a known dirty cop with a history of racial profiling. Lasker claims Daniel's car matches the description of a getaway vehicle from a recent robbery. Despite Daniel's protests, Lasker cuffs him on the spot. Meanwhile, Judge William Mercer, a powerful figure with deep ties to corruption, is already aware of the case. He and Lasker have framed countless men before to protect their criminal network. This time, they need a scapegoat for a botched drug deal that left an undercover officer dead. At the police station, Daniel realizes he's being railroaded. The so-called evidence against him, a bag of drugs found in his trunk and a gun with his fingerprints, was planted. Witnesses are coached to identify him. The public defender assigned to him is inexperienced and overwhelmed, barely fighting against the tidal wave of false charges. In court, Judge Mercer ensures a quick conviction. The jury is manipulated, the trial is rushed, and Daniel is sentenced to life without parole. As he's led away in chains, he locks eyes with Lasker, who smirks. They think they've won. But what they don't know is that Daniel has a secret, one that could bring their entire empire of corruption crashing down. Dimly lit interrogation room, his wrists aching from the too tight handcuffs. He's been here for hours, bombarded with accusations. Across from him, Detective Ray Lasker leans back in his chair, smug and confident. On the table, a bag of drugs and a pistol, neither of which belong to Daniel, are presented as irrefutable evidence. "We got you dead to rights," Lasker sneers. "Best thing you can do is confess." Daniel shakes his head. He knows the truth. He was pulled over for no reason, yanked from his car, and searched without cause. The items must have been planted, but the system isn't built for men like him to prove their innocence. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Judge William Mercer ensures the case moves forward swiftly. He and Lasker have done this before, framing innocent men, covering up their own crimes, and making sure any loose ends disappear. This time, they need a quick conviction to deflect attention from a failed undercover operation that left an officer dead. Daniel is the perfect scapegoat. At his first court hearing, Daniel's assigned a public defender, overwhelmed and underprepared. The so-called witnesses, a paid informant, and a rookie officer afraid to cross Lasker, give false testimony. Surveillance footage that could prove Daniel's alibi conveniently goes missing. In the courtroom, Judge Mercer denies every motion that could help Daniel. Requests for independent forensic testing? Denied. Cross-examination of the informant's credibility? Overruled. The jury, carefully selected and subtly influenced, is steered toward only one conclusion. By the time the verdict is read, guilty. Daniel isn't even surprised. He looks at Lasker, who gives him a mocking wink. Judge Mercer barely glances up as he delivers the sentence. Life without parole. Sitting in his prison cell, Daniel Carter replays the moment over and over. The guilty verdict, the smirk on Lasker's face, the cold indifference of Judge Mercer. They think they've buried him, but they don't know the truth. Daniel holds a secret, one that could destroy them. Months before his arrest, Daniel had been working on a car in his shop when he overheard a conversation between two men arguing outside. He recognized one voice immediately, Detective Ray Lasker. The other was a man he didn't know at the time, but he now realizes was Officer James Kincaid, the undercover cop who was later found dead. Daniel hadn't thought much of it then, but one thing stood out. Kincaid was threatening to expose something big. He was angry, accusing Lasker of betrayal. Something about dirty money, a fake bust, and how he wasn't going to take the fall for it. Daniel had forgotten about it, until now. Kincaid's death had been blamed on gang violence, a convenient cover-up. But what if it was something else? What if Lasker had silenced him? And what if Daniel was framed because he had been close enough to overhear the truth? There's more. Unbeknownst to Lasker and Mercer, Daniel had recorded part of that conversation on his phone. It had started as an accident. He often used voice memos to jot down car repair notes, and the app had been running when the argument happened. The recording wasn't perfect, but keywords were clear. Fake bust, Mercer, shut up or you're next. Before his arrest, Daniel had backed up the file to the cloud. He had forgotten about it in the chaos of the trial. But now, in the silence of his cell, he realizes it might be his only way out and the only way to take them down. The problem? He can't access it from prison. He needs someone on the outside, someone he can trust. Daniel Carter knows he can't bring down Lasker and Mercer alone. He needs help, someone who believes in him, someone with the connections and courage to expose the truth. There's only one person who fits that description: Maggie Turner. Maggie, a retired journalist in her late 60s, has spent her life uncovering corruption. She had once reported on Lasker's shady dealings, but could never get enough evidence to make charges stick. When she hears about Daniel's conviction, something doesn't sit right with her. She's seen cases like his before, too neat, too fast. One day, Maggie receives a handwritten letter from Daniel, smuggled out through a fellow inmate. Inside, he writes, "I have proof. Lasker and Mercer killed Kincaid. They set me up to cover their tracks. You're the only one I can trust." Maggie's hands tremble as she reads. If Daniel is telling the truth, this could be the story of a lifetime, and a chance to finally take down the men she's been chasing for years. She starts digging. Calling in old favors, she reaches out to a former cop-turned-private investigator, Luis Navarro, who once worked with Lasker but left the force in disgust. Together, they track down Tyrone Briggs, a man who was once pressured into staying silent about Lasker's crimes. As Maggie pieces together the puzzle, she realizes that exposing the truth won't be easy. Lasker and Mercer still hold power, and they're willing to kill to protect their secrets. But Maggie isn't backing down, and neither is Daniel. Her digs deeper into Daniel Carter's case, determined to find something, anything, that can shake the foundation of Lasker and Mercer's corruption. She starts by tracking down Tyrone Briggs, a man Daniel mentioned in his letter. Tyrone had been a low-level drug dealer years ago, but something changed. He vanished from the streets overnight. When Maggie finds him working a quiet job as a janitor in a rundown apartment complex, he's hesitant to talk. "I don't want no trouble," he mutters, refusing to meet her eyes. But Maggie isn't easily shaken. She tells him about Daniel, about the setup, and about how Lasker and Mercer have been doing this for years. Finally, Tyrone sighs and lets something slip. "I saw Lasker plant evidence before. I kept quiet because I didn't want to end up like Kincaid." That name, Kincaid, is the crack Maggie needs. With this lead, she reaches out to Luis Navarro, the ex-cop turned private investigator. Luis digs into old police records and finds something damning. Kincaid had filed an internal complaint against Lasker just days before his death. The file was buried. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Daniel makes a desperate move. Using a burner phone smuggled in by an inmate ally, he manages to send Maggie the most important piece of all, the recording. When Maggie listens to the grainy audio of Lasker and Kincaid's last conversation, her heart pounds. This is it. This is proof. But as she presses forward, she doesn't realize that she's being watched. Lasker knows someone is snooping around, and he's ready to shut them down permanently. Maggie Turner knows she's running out of time. The recording Daniel sent her is the smoking gun, proof that Lasker and Mercer orchestrated Kincaid's murder and framed Daniel to cover it up. But exposing them won't be easy. She and Luis Navarro devise a plan. They need to make the evidence public before Lasker or Mercer can silence them. Luis reaches out to an old friend, Detective Carla Reyes, one of the few honest cops left in the department. Reyes is hesitant. Lasker has connections everywhere. But when she hears the recording, she knows they're telling the truth. Meanwhile, Daniel is in danger. The moment Lasker finds out he smuggled out the recording, he puts a hit out on him inside the prison. Daniel is attacked in the yard. 3 inmates jump him, knives flashing. But Daniel fights back, using every ounce of strength to survive. Just as it looks like the end, a guard arrives and breaks it up. Daniel is badly wounded but alive. Maggie realizes they need to act now. She takes a risk and leaks the recording to an investigative journalist. The next morning, the story breaks. Explosive new evidence ties Judge Mercer and Detective Lasker to cover up in cop's murder. The city erupts in scandal. Protesters gather outside the courthouse, demanding justice. Mercer stays silent, but Lasker, desperate and furious, decides to eliminate the problem himself. That night, Maggie hears a noise outside her house. She isn't alone. Lasker is coming for her, but Maggie isn't unprepared.